네, 먼저 대구시에서 적극적으로 유치 제안을 했고요. 또 유치 전에 직접 외국의 주요 멤버들이 대구를 방문을 하시고 그 지원이라든가 인프라를 보고 굉장히 감명을 많이 받으셨습니다. 그래서 실질적으로 유치 경쟁을 호주의 브리스번하고 UAE의 아부다비 그리고 대구가 붙었는데 여러 가지 인프라 지원 조건 그런 것들이 대구가 가장 우수한 점수를 받았고요. 많은 호평을 받았습니다. 앞으로 해외 학회 유치를 계획하고 계신다면은 대구 컨벤션 뷰로와 하신다면은 A부터 Z까지 다 도움을 받으실 수 있고 확률 100%로 유치 성공할 것으로 확신합니다.
Welcome everyone to 2021 Korea International Travel Expo, Korea Travel Mart online conference. And I'm Won Hyun-jung, your MC today, following yesterday and the day before yesterday. Thank you very much for joining us again. And this is the last session of the conference, the Travel Mart conference. And Korea International Travel Expo 2021 is held as part of efforts to protect the suffering domestic tourism ecosystem and share information for the resumption of tourism. Out of 4 themes of MICE, travel to Korea, luxury travel, and medical and wellness, we are now at the second theme, which is Korea Travel Mart. And let me walk you through programs for Korea Travel Mart. The Korea Travel Mart ends today, but various other programs will be available through July 13th until the end of the expo. There are special offers from Travel Mart, special price offer for products for online tour Korea, to early bird flight tickets, and many other travel products at Korea Travel Pavilion, and information regarding travel quarantine guidelines of Korea and safe destinations available at Safe Trip to Korea Center. And today you can enjoy Travel to Korea live talk show that starts at 9 p.m. featuring a global K-pop band ATEEZ. Please join the talk through Korea International Travel Expo website tonight. And we have an interesting event too, so please stay interested. And we will start the last session of the Korea Travel Mart conference. Korea Travel Mart Conference aims to discuss solutions to revitalize domestic tourism and share business marketing strategies and insights for tourism industry in a new normal era, and covers 3 sessions for 3 days. On July 5th, the first session was with the topic of current status regarding international tourism resumption, and July 6th, the second session covered best practices of digital tourism marketing. And finally, today, the third and last session is being held under the topic of trend and prospects for global aviation industry. The topic of third session today is trend and prospects for global aviation industry, and it covers aviation sectors to discuss the efforts of Korean and global aviation industries and prospects for the change and resumption of international exchanges after vaccination. We have 3 speakers for the presentation, and let me briefly introduce them. The first presentation is about demand forecast for aviation industry and commitment to reopening international lines in Korea. And the presenter is Dr. Jung Se-yeon from Incheon International Airport Corporation, Airport Industry Technology Research Institute. And second presentation will be given on the topic of priorities of the IATA for the reopening of air travel. And the presentation will be given by Director Vinod Goel from the IATA. Last presentation is on current status of COVID responses and strategies to prepare for the resumption of international tourism by Korean local airports, and the presentation will be given by Vice Director Lee Ho-suk from Korea Airport Corporation. So first presentation, Dr. Jung Se-yeon from Airport Industry Technology Research Institute will talk about demand forecast for aviation industry and commitment to reopening international lines in Korea.
Good morning or good afternoon. My name is Jung Se-yeon from Airport Industry Technology Research Institute of IIAC. The title of my presentation is The Prospect for the Global Aviation Industry and Preparation for Post-COVID Era. I will present demand monitoring results, airports' efforts bracing for post-COVID era, as well as preparation to ensure safe trips in the future. First, let me talk about the outcome of demand monitoring. Starting December 2020, countries have been vaccinating people against the virus. The vaccination rate is 20% for the world population, 63% for Israel, and 61% for the UK. These countries are approaching 70% threshold of herd immunity. The vaccination rate in Korea is about 22% according to a recent data. As a result, the number of newly confirmed cases is going down. Looking at vaccination status in different regions, we can expect a certain level of stability for the pandemic situation. Next, I will present the impact of vaccination on air passengers. When you look at the graph, it shows the vaccine rate. It shows as the vaccination rate goes up, the number of newly confirmed cases goes down. In particular, countries with the vaccination rate of 30% or higher clearly witnessed the slowdown of the spread of the virus. However, as you see on the right side, there is a time gap between countries on vaccination and COVID outbreak, so this is not the entire world recovering altogether. Instead, different regions have different stages of recovery from COVID-19. As such, we are expecting the recovery of demand for air travel will be different by regions. Now, let me talk about the current status of global air transportation. In 2020, the number of air passengers decreased by 74% globally. It was especially striking in Asia. In China, it was 68%, and in Japan, it was 78%. In case of Europe, the decrease was 53%. On the right side, there are major airports around the world. Incheon Airport saw 83% decrease compared to 2019. For Beijing Airport, it was 65%, and for Changi Airport, it was 82.6%. These airports mostly handled international flights, so they were hit the hardest. But the aviation industry as a whole is facing difficulties around the world. Next, this is the ranking of major airports in passenger handling. As of May 2021, Dubai Airport is number 1, followed by Istanbul Airport. In case of Incheon, it was number 5 before, but the ranking dropped to 45th. Dubai didn't see much of decrease since it could maintain connecting flights. And Europe allows people to travel freely in the region based on the Schengen Agreement, so the continent could also maintain the number of international flights. For cargo handling, Cheonggam Airport in Hong Kong is number 1, followed by Pudong Airport and Incheon Airport. So these airports are maintaining the level of cargo handling quite well. Now I will focus on Incheon Airport. The airport saw a steady growth in the number of passengers since its opening, but due to the impact of COVID-19, there was 83.1% decrease in 2020. The same goes for the number of international flights operated. It showed a continuous growth until COVID, but there was a 63% year-on-year decrease. Against this backdrop, we conducted a survey on passengers' mentality. Based on the result, we developed a model to predict the demand. So, the survey asked questions to find out potential recovery of demand following vaccination. As a result, about 80% of respondents answered that they are willing to be vaccinated, and about half of them replied that they are willing to travel abroad. About 54.8% said they wouldn't go abroad right after vaccination. Instead, they will wait for 3 months to 1 year before that. So we reflected such results in our model to predict the demand recovery, and we also took resilience into consideration. So this is the predicted outcome based on different scenarios. We expect only 3% to 22% of passengers compared to 2019. That means there is no signs of dramatic recovery this year. However, vaccination is an ongoing effort, and there are policies such as travel bubble, which could advance the recovery. Now, we will look at different airports that are preparing for post-COVID era to fully restart their businesses. We collected data on airports around the world, and most of them were reinforcing preventive measures and making efforts to revive the travel industry and adopting digital health pass. First, for the reinforcement of preventive measures, airports have started zero-touch services through smart technologies. As you see in these pictures, Guangzhou and Dallas airports adopted touchless systems and employed AI robots for disinfection. Dallas Airport took one step further by operating unmanned stores to expand contactless services. In case of Hong Kong Airport, they are using robots to disinfect the entire airport and conduct antibacterial activities. In Japanese airports such as Narita, Kansai, and Haneda, smart PCR tests have been running. Recently, biometric data has been utilized for identity monitoring, so now people can spend less time at immigration, and the One ID system is actively being adopted. India is using iris patterns for its single token-based One ID system. On the right side, you can find examples of München, Atlanta, and Dubai airports that have been using biometrics to expand touchless services as part of their efforts to reinforce preventive measures. Now, let me talk about efforts to resume international travel. With more and more people getting vaccinated, countries are striving to resume travel. The UK adopted a traffic light system to give grading to different countries based on the number of newly confirmed cases and vaccination rate. So, it is not a single policy applied to every country. Based on the safety grading, different approaches are used for the quarantine period and tests. This is one example of effort to resume international travel at the national level. And countries are bracing for potentially prolonged suspension of certain routes by trying to resume flights with safe countries step by step. And I'm not sure whether you have heard of this, but travel bubble is also on the way. Under the travel bubble scheme, depending on the demand for air travel and the level of prevention, authorities in charge consult one another to allow free travel without quarantine between two countries. Korea is also pushing forward the travel bubble through agreements with other countries. The European Union as well is working on exemption of quarantine for vaccinated US citizens. And Phuket in Thailand has also allowed vaccinated people to travel without self-quarantine period. Next item I will talk about is digital health pass. We live in a digital world, so to confirm the COVID-19 test result, a platform to save digital passport information as well as health-related certificates is being actively developed. One example is IATA Travel Pass. Many airlines at Incheon Airport have adopted IATA Travel Pass, and Korean Air has been operating a pilot on the Travel Pass since May. Digital Health Pass is a platform to save health requirements and vaccination certificate in the form of a passport. And it is very easy to share information. And for the time being, negative test results will be required when traveling. So, to streamline immigration procedures, Travel Pass has an important role to play. At Incheon Airport as well, you can find a travel pass where biometrics generate ID for passengers. It will be used for identification and documentation, boarding based on biometrics, and duty-free shopping. So it will streamline the immigration procedures and improve efficiency in airport operation. So, in the future, when we resume international travel, how can we prepare for that in a safe manner? First, we need to prepare for health control. The 9/11 terrorist attack made a security check at the airport much stronger. The same goes for COVID-19. There will be additional checks such as health control. With preventive measures being included in the airport process, we expect people might have to wait longer to go through all the process at the airport, so you should keep this in mind. And with newly adopted health-related process, passengers should check the location of test stations at the airport in advance. That is why Incheon Airport is running a PCR test station so that people can get the test swiftly. And as I mentioned earlier, for identification, digital health pass is being widely adopted, so we need to raise awareness of the system. According to our recent survey on digital travel pass, 72% of respondents said they didn't know it. So the awareness level is very low. So we need to raise awareness among passengers. Passengers should check new rules in advance. And for a safe travel, Incheon Airport adopted safe immigration procedures and advanced technologies based on collaboration with immigration and quarantine authorities. So this is the end of my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Doctor. I have several questions to the presentation. A lot of countries and a lot of airports are making efforts in introducing biorecognition service or non-contact services for stronger quarantine measures. And so what are you doing or planning to do at Incheon Airport?
Yes, I talked about it in my presentation. And recently, touchless services are widely adopted. And the same goes for Incheon Airport. We employed robots to clean the airport, and we will work on various technologies in the future. And we will utilize a smart pass for immigration procedures based on biometrics.
Thank you for the detailed answer. I have one more question. As an Asian hub airport, Incheon Airport is doing its best to make the travel as convenient and pleasant as possible for many tourists. What could be some considerations from the side of tourists to enjoy safer air travel?
Yes, as I mentioned in my presentation, when we resume international travel, health control could be included in the process. In that case, you might have to wait longer at the airport. So there are changes to the procedure. So you have to check that, and you also have to check whether you have to go through a PCR test.
Thank you very much for the answer, Dr. Jung Se-yeon from the Airport Industry Technology Research Institute of the Incheon International Airport Corporation. And next, the second speaker is from the IATA. Vinoop Goel, in charge of Airport and International Affairs in Asia and the Pacific region at the IATA, who will talk about priorities of the IATA for the reopening of air travel.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Vinoop Goel, and I'm here to talk about IATA's priorities for air travel recovery. I would like to thank the Korea Tourism Organization for inviting IATA to speak at this Korea International Travel Expo 2021. It is truly an honor to be part of this very important event for the recovery of travel and tourism in Korea. But before we start, a quick word about IATA, the International Air Transport Association. We are a trade association representing the airlines of the world, and we are proud to have most of the airlines in Korea among our close to 300 members. Our mission is to represent and serve our airline members, and we work with governments and other stakeholders for the future growth of the air travel industry in a safe, secure, and sustainable manner. The ongoing COVID crisis has had a devastating impact on global economies, on families, on friends, especially on aviation and travel and tourism in general. But as you can see from this chart, global economy is already back above pre-COVID levels. Unfortunately, the story is not the same for air travel. Since the lows of April and May 2020, domestic air travel has recovered slowly but steadily in most markets, as you can see from the slides. And there's some variation between the regions, with Asia Pacific actually leading the way. That is a good story. But unfortunately, the international air travel sector continues to face headwinds, with the Asia Pacific region as the worst performer, as you can see from this slide. Traffic in this part of the world is just around 5% compared to pre-COVID levels. The key reason for this is a strict border restrictions and quarantine implemented all across Asia compared to other regions. And that is why traffic has not picked up, but I'll come to that in more detail later. Looking back at the past few decades, the airline industry has suffered from a few shocks, including the 1991 and 2009 recessions, 2001 terrorist attacks, and SARS in 2003. The good news is that the industry has always rebounded, and that too fairly quickly. So we remain optimistic about the prospects of air travel globally. Our forecast for the recovery of air travel is that we will return to pre-COVID 2019 levels by 2023, thus in about 2 years' time. But do note, there is a big range of uncertainty as this recovery depends on a number of factors. For example, if there are new and more severe variants, or if vaccinations pace is slow, then the recovery will also be slower. Our longer-term forecast beyond 2023 is for the industry to return to its pre-COVID growth levels of around 4% per annum. But we will lag pre-COVID forecast levels by around 2 years. The good news for our region, the Asia Pacific region, is that we expect to see faster growth compared to the rest of the world. This is largely due to the huge domestic markets in China, India, Indonesia. In Korea too, we have seen a rebound in domestic travel, which is encouraging news for the industry as a whole. So what do we need to do to restart international air travel? IATA took a number of steps. First, we asked the public, the traveling people, what they want. We also analyzed why international air travel has stopped. IATA does periodic global surveys, and the good news is that people still want to travel. They don't want to wait for the pandemic to end. And more than 80% of them told us that they will not travel if they need to quarantine. Quarantine, as you know, does not allow for business or leisure travel and is almost as good as keeping borders closed. And unfortunately, most countries in Asia Pacific impose quarantine on passengers, which explains the low level of international air travel in this region. Passengers also gave us some insights into any solutions for travel. Most people are willing and eager to use technology to facilitate travel, but data privacy is critical and passengers need to be in control of their personal data. So what is IATA doing about this? We are engaging governments on 4 major areas: development of a national roadmap, vaccination protocols for travel, testing protocols for travel, and the IATA Travel Pass. Now let me go into details for each of the 4. A national roadmap is basically a plan that looks at the health situation and vaccine rollout in the country. And then based on the timeline for these, we urge authorities to gradually relax travel and border restrictions. Having a national roadmap with industry input will allow all stakeholders to plan for the restart of travel and tourism in a safe and orderly manner. Our core message is to reopen borders without quarantine through a combination of vaccination and testing. Our aspirational goal is to have all the borders open across the world without quarantine by the end of 2021. There's still a few months to go in this year, and we are hopeful with the increased pace of vaccinations that we will meet this goal. Moving on to vaccinations, our messages are: travel cannot be limited to vaccinated passengers. You need to allow for everyone to travel. But waiting for full vaccination before reopening borders is going to be too late. We do support unrestricted access for vaccinated travelers. And aviation workers should be prioritized for vaccination. But of course, after the high-risk elderly and frontline medical workers are vaccinated. Lastly, we need governments to support and roll out digital vaccination certificates. The third focus area is the use of testing. There are many different testing requirements across the world. Testing before departure, testing on arrival, testing before departure and testing on arrival, etc. IATA's positions are: there should be enough testing capacity to cater to passenger numbers, especially when travel recovers. Testing should be affordable and fast. PCR testing is expensive and slow, and now there are faster and cheaper alternatives like antigen testing. And countries should also enable the issuance and use of digital test certificates, and unfortunately that is not the case in Korea. And finally, government should accept the IATA Travel Pass framework for verification of vaccination and test certificates. Moving on, which brings us to the main topic. What is the IATA Travel Pass? And I'm sure some of you have heard of it, but allow me to go into some details. One of the biggest challenges to the scalable restart of aviation is for passengers, airlines, and governments to navigate the different COVID requirements across the world. Air travelers face a confusing and challenging situations. They need accurate information on what is the testing or vaccine requirement for entry to a country, where to find these centers, and also airlines need to verify the authenticity of these test and vaccination certificates that the air travelers show them. And governments need to do the same. And today's processes are based on paper certificates, but the risk of fraud because of the high number of fake paper certificates and the easy way of getting access to this poses a problem. Paper certificates can be easily modified or forged, and they're difficult, if not impossible, to verify and very slow to process. In fact, we have estimated that if travel returns to pre-COVID levels, passenger processing time at airports will increase from 1.5 hours to maybe 8 hours. So the IATA Travel Pass has been developed to address these issues in response to requests from our airline members. So what is the IATA Travel Pass? It has a number of modules. There is a contactless app that the passenger holds on his or her mobile phone, which contains their identity and other information. There's a thematic database of worldwide COVID rules and regulations. There's a lab solutions to issue test certificates. And these work together to make the IATA Travel Pass ecosystem, which is modular, interoperable, and based on global standards. Here's an overview of how this entire ecosystem will work. First of all, the passenger sets up his or her digital identity using an e-passport. Then the passenger imports his or her travel itinerary, and the travel pass displays automatically the testing requirements and the locations to get such a test. Next, the passenger goes for the test to one of these locations and then receives the test results into the contactless app in a safe and secure way. The application then automatically checks with the thematic rule database to see if the passenger has met the conditions for travel and gives an OK to travel or otherwise a not OK to travel. The passenger then has the ability to choose and share this data with airlines or governments or border control. This can be done in advance so the passenger is pre-cleared to fly and thus avoiding lengthy checks or processes at the airport either on departure or on arrival. You may recall that a passenger survey showed that most people were concerned with privacy and wanted to control this data. The IATA Travel Pass has been built on these privacy principles and complies with country regulations. There is no central database of passenger details, and the passenger has the right to choose who to share the data with and when. We are very pleased that the response from airlines has been very positive, and about 40 airlines have announced trials, and many more are working with us to roll out the IATA Travel Pass. And we look forward to these airlines implementing the travel pass and making it available to their passengers. In addition to the IATA Travel Pass, there are a couple more initiatives that the IATA is working on for travelers. We have put on our internet the thematic database, which, as I mentioned before, is the database for entry rules into countries. Given that the entry rules are very different and keep changing every day, there are almost about 200 changes per day sometimes. So we have put this database on the internet and travelers can access it for free to understand the entry requirements of the destinations. In addition, we have also worked with the World Tourism Organization to launch a destination tracker. This includes all information related to restrictions and regulations of the destinations that these passengers may be interested. So in closing, what are some of IATA's messages for the Republic of Korea? Korea has taken some really positive steps to reopen travel, and we really appreciate the initiative to reopen borders for some vaccinated passengers. But we look forward to additional categories of vaccinated passengers being exempted from quarantine. We also need the Korean government to enable issuance of digital test certificates similar to what has been done with vaccinations. We also hope that the government will accept IATA Travel Pass to verify health credentials. And lastly, we look forward to working together with the Korean government on a roadmap for the safe reopening of borders without quarantine. So thank you very much, and I hope you found this session useful. Please visit the IATA website, www.iata.org, for additional information on IATA's initiatives and guidance materials. 감사합니다. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. And I have a couple of questions about your presentation. Travel Pass will be adopted globally, so it is a so-called digital passport information and a platform to save health certificate. These are adopted in different countries across the globe. And was there any country-specific difference in the procedure to use them or to build them? And what are the preparations the countries have to go through to introduce a travel pass?
First of all, the governments need to ensure that the national frameworks allow for the issuance and verification of test and vaccine certificates. And secondly, that such certificates are based on global ICAO and WHO standards. Governments should also accept digital solutions, such as the IATA Travel Pass, instead of requiring paper certificates on entry into the country.
Thank you for the informative answer. And I have one more question. To ensure a safe opening of borders, some people say that we need to build a common travel health standard. And does IATA think there are prerequisites to define common elements and standard?
Yes, the IATA Travel Pass meets the necessary conditions. The IATA Travel Pass is a digital platform to facilitate the use of testing and vaccination certificates in a verifiable, safe, and privacy-protecting manner. It's based on international standards and is modular and interoperable. Airlines around the world are looking at implementing it, and many governments are supporting it too.
Thank you for the detailed answer. Already, it is time for the last presentation of today, and Vice Director Lee Hyo-suk of Korea Airport Corporation is the next speaker. And Vice Director will talk about the current status of COVID response at local airports in Korea and strategies to prepare for resumption of international tourism.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I am Lee Hyo-suk, Head of Route Development and Passenger Promotion Department of the Korean Airport Corporation. My topic today is quarantine measures of local airports and KAC's efforts to resume tourism. The Korean Airport Corporation has been managing 14 airports in Gimpo, Daegu, and Jeju, except for Incheon. And as of 2019, 520,000 flights are in operation, carrying over 86.6 million passengers. Now, moving on to air travel demand after COVID. The year 2020 saw the passenger recover to 61% of the 2019, while 2021, 71%. With increasing rate of vaccination and bigger expectations for normalization of domestic travel, we expect bigger recovery in the second half. And next is air travel demand in KAC airports after the COVID. In April 2020, all international lines were unified under Incheon Airport, and as of 2021, Kimhae, Jeju, and Daegu airports have only one international line in operation per week. Next, moving on to the current status of 14 local airports. This is the current status, as you can see from the slide, and with longer shutdown of international lines than expected, airline companies and travel agencies face more serious crisis, and passengers have to arrive at Incheon Airport and move to local cities one more time, which really becomes a burden to both airline companies and local residents. Fortunately, the international line resumed in July 2020, and Kimhae Airport particularly. So starting from July 2020, international flights departing Kimhae, Jeju, and Daegu airports reopened, and Kimhae Airport deployed more personnel while operating separation quarantine facilities and transport system, all through organic cooperation that could reopen the arrival process. With the international lines closed at local airports, the airport shops and local residents have suffered significant losses so far. But local airports have domestic and international terminals totally independent from each other, and it is possible to completely separate from domestic passengers moving lines, and therefore use the international terminal exclusively for travel bubble or vaccinated passengers exempted from quarantine. And I think international lines need to be resumed after the COVID for these reasons. Number 3, collaboration for growth. To fast restore demands for international lines after the COVID, airport fees can be cut or exempted, and for inland regions with weaker background demands, online non-contact promotion is needed, while pitching the local airports and their facilities that comply with the international quarantine standards. To reopen international lines at the local airports, strict quarantine measures would be absolutely necessary. Currently, Gimpo, Gimhae, Jeju, Daegu, and Cheongju airports have won ACI airport quarantine certification, securing enough safety. And all facilities of the airports and all the departure arrival processes must go through regular quarantine measures, and social distancing is strictly complied, and prior notice is always given to passengers. So that all the airports are safe enough for passengers to visit. To reopen international lines at local airports and resume air travel, we will work on longer-term projects to grow the industry as a whole. With safe, no-landing international tour flights operation, Gimpo, Gimhae, and Daegu airports earned trust. So those lines where entry is allowed for tourism purpose or self-isolation is exempted may be considered first for opening for outbound passengers. And we plan to start with foreigners who are vaccinated through cooperation with relevant organizations. After the end of COVID, we will focus on inbound demand-based growth and provide an opportunity for local airports and cities to prove their quarantine safety. And we are planning to invite airliners and media for FAM tour. And we will also conduct market research and do the promotion to help airline companies with their efforts to reopen international lines. And we also plan to work with countries that mutually allow entry into their countries in linking with local OTAs to do the promotion for flight tickets, travel products, and early bird discount to encourage demand recovery. And we also plan to work with governments and agencies to improve notice system for arrivals and also improve border control services. Particularly at Daegu and Muan airports, we plan to build a traveler center that can sell tourism products instead of just working as an info center, and also a place for refreshing and relaxing will be built. And for airport to go beyond just being a terminal and become a tourism product itself, Cheongju Airport plans to build experience hall for Jikji, the city's famous cultural legacy. And for stronger inbound tourism at local airports, securing connecting transportation is quintessential. And thus, relevant organizations and local governments' cooperation is utmost necessary. This wraps up my presentation. And thank you very much for listening to my presentation about the KITE's efforts for the resumption of the international lines at the local airports. And the KITE will stay committed to improving and developing the local airports.
Thank you, Vice Director, for a great presentation. And I came up with a couple of questions. And local airports are trying to overcome the current crisis, and they are making various attempts to resume the international tourism. But there is an analysis that it will take time until the resumption of international flights. And do you have any measures to expand the international flights?
First of all, we have to show them that our airports are safe and that also the destination themselves are safe. And maybe we should have stronger pitch for accommodation or food and the destination cities themselves, so that inbound tourists can feel more secure and safer.
Thank you for the detailed answer. And I have one more question for you. Lowering an airport usage fee was a measure to help and support airliners and ground handling companies in difficulties. I know that you have made efforts in that direction. The situation is getting better, but many people still believe that it will take a long time to overcome the current situation. And are you coming up with additional measures in response to the current situation?
We plan to utilize idle flights and facilities of the LCC and other carriers to support airliners running domestic lines and promote local tourism by using inland routes. And we will cooperate with carriers and travel agencies in doing joint promotion, live commerce, and pitching online travel products for local airports, while also jointly developing small travel products with travel agencies, all as part of our efforts to generate travel demands that make sense in a COVID era. Thank you.
Thank you for the detailed answer. And I would like to thank Vice Director Lee Ho-suk of Korea Airport Corporation once again. So we just listened to all the three presentations for the session, and it was such a meaningful conference to learn about the preparation and efforts of the aviation industry targeting post-COVID era. We are finishing up the third session of Korea Travel MART conference, and the conference ends here. However, Korea International Travel Expo continues until July 13th. And if you access our website now, you can look at the pavilion to introduce participating companies, and you can also visit Korea Travel Promotion Pavilion, where you can enjoy virtual tour products and early bird airline tickets at a discount price. And you can also visit Safe Trip to Korea Pavilion, where you can find information on safe tourist spots. And from 9 p.m., we have a special time with ENG, who is a global pop star, and we will have a live talk show with ENG. And you can visit the website of the expo for the live talk show, so please stay with us. And we will begin Korea Luxury Travel Mart tomorrow, and I would like to ask for your interest in the event as well. And it has been Won Hyun-jung and the MC of the conference. Thank you very much.